And Intellectual and Boundaries Commission Chairperson Wafula Chebukati declared Uhuru Kenyatta president-elect following the October 26 repeat presidential election. Voter turnout was disputed, with opposition leaders claiming a turnout of less than 30% and that the figures were inflated, while IEBC Chairperson Wafula Chebukati maintained that the voter turnout was 38.84%. The National Super Alliance leader Raila Odinga has said that he can only dialogue with President Uhuru Kenyatta on holding fresh elections in 90 days and nothing else. And Raila, while the Jubilee Party has criticized the opposition for boycotting the election and sabotaging the economy, meanwhile, the National Council of Churches of Kenya, NCCK, has called for dialogue and urgent reforms for the sake of Kenyans. The parliamentary wing of the National Resistance Movement has officially launched a boycott of products from companies it claims are supporting Jubilee.
Provide goods and services which are used to abuse the rights of Kenyans.
We are calling for a boycott that will act, a boycott that will be painful, a boycott that will bring these corporations on their knees and to their senses until they stand up for electoral justice expressed through fair, free, and credible elections.
Those are some of the top stories we'll be tackling at this hour. My guest in studio, Brian Bugwa, is a political strategist, and Pamela Dhiambo is the women representative of the county of Migori. My name is Akisa Wandera. Crossfire begins now. All right, I'd want us to begin with President Uhuru Kenyatta's speech right after being declared winner of the October 26th repeat poll at the Bomas of Kenya. Let's take a look at what he said specifically on how the opposition and NASA leader Raila Odinga acted in that particular election.
Fellow Kenyans, despite the fact that my major competitor went to court demanding that the presidential election be nullified and was actually granted his pleading and an annulment, he chose to ignore the rest of the ruling, which ordered a fresh election in 60 days, conducted by none other than the independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission as constituted. Therefore, he ultimately chose to abandon the fresh poll. I say this: you cannot choose the opportunity to exercise a right and therefore and thereafter abscond from the consequences of that choice.
President Uhuru Kenyatta there just after being declared winner and receiving his certificate from Chairperson Wafula Chebukati. I'd want to start with you, Pamela. From what we're hearing from the president there, seemingly saying that Raila Odinga abandoned a cause he had fought for at the courts.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers. I think the president was right up to the point he was saying that Raila Amolo Odinga, who is the presidential candidate of NASA, fought for a cause. But remember, after the cause was fought for and the pronouncement was made, there was this bit that wanted certain things or demanded and implied and spoke aloud that certain things be done. There were the concept of irregularities and illegalities. And so NASA team came up with the list of reforms that needed to have been done before the 60 days. And there was no indication, and in fact it came to pass, that none of those suggestions or even prayers that we may have a free, fair, and credible election was done by the IBC. And realizing this, Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga said he would not participate in that kind of a sham election because there was no guarantee at all that there was going to be fairness. And in fact, by the end of the day, I think what we witnessed on 26th and thereafter is self-telling. We have seen cases like a particular clip where some lady, my fellow Honorable Alice, was actually recorded forcing some things which the officer in question did not see necessary to do.
But this then...
And then we are saying that he abandoned. He did not abandon it. He simply said, we are not going to participate in a flawed process, and so getting the same results and even worse than like what we saw. So it was not necessary.
But this then was largely seen by those who don't support him as a man who is selfish and wants things to go his way as far as elections are concerned in this country.
It is not selfishness. I want to tell Kenyans and everybody else, including myself, it may be seen like Raila is fighting for himself. But if you look at this thing critically, you'll see that it is for the posterity of this country, even the young people, even the unborn children. Because some of the injustices that we have seen during electoral situations in Kenya are far-reaching. Their effects are not just ending with Raila. They will end with the generations to come. And that's why it is still a worthwhile fight to make sure that we come back to Kenya where the vote of even one person counts.
Brian, for you, is it abandonment of a cause or fighting for a good cause for Raila Odinga there?
I think Mheshimiwa is confusing Kenya of the 1990s and the Kenyans of today. The nullification by the Supreme Court itself, it's a testament that institutions are working, and the constitution that we received in 2010 is working. Raila Odinga has been the forefront fighting for this constitution, and is not giving it space for the constitution to breathe and the institution created by the constitution to do their work. Supreme Court made a ruling, and NASA, that's Supreme Court, so for some prayers which were granted, and none of the prayers was to reconstitute IBC. So when Supreme Court made the order, it instructed the second respondent as IBC, the first respondent as IBC, to conduct the fresh election. It's the Supreme Court itself said that they could not find anybody culpable of the mess. It was systematic. And as you could see, if you have read the judgment, you're a journalist and this is a media house. If there were anything grave in that judgment, you could have picked those parts and made it public. But when you read the judgment, you'll see the biggest mistake. In fact, the judgment says the biggest thing that Chebukati did is not verifying Form 34As against Form 34Bs. And the problem with Form 34Bs and Form 34As was just administrative. Lack of signatures, stamps, those are administrative, which IBC can do without being instructed by NASA. NASA should also respect that IBC is independent, and Maraga gave an assurance to NASA. If the same thing happens, they go back to court, he will nullify the same election. So
for you, we went back to an election with an institution that, from the word go, is being blamed for that particular election being annulled. On the other hand, do you think that this particular election, the repeat poll, was free, fair, and credible as per what is prescribed in the Constitution?
To me, it was not just the repeat election. To me, I believe, because I was part of the process, from 8th of August, the election was free and fair. Up to this point, you know, we've had several petitions before, and IBC has been culpable before. But the same IBC, which is used to conduct those by-election. Even Mheshimiwa here, if he's really serious that IBC is flawed, he should resign. All NASA senators and MPs, they were declared by the same IBC that they're saying is flawed. If they are really, really serious that IBC was flawed at that point, I'd like to see their seriousness by first resigning and saying this IBC does not have the moral authority to declare me the winner. But if you can declare them the winner and they accept it, and then they declare Uhuru Kenyatta the winner and they don't accept it,
this is an argument that has been on the forefront, especially from your Jubilee counterparts and those who seem to be leaning towards Jubilee, that if indeed you don't think this institution is working, why then did you get into office through the same institution?
Friends and my politicals, analyst, you called him. I think let us face one fact. The announcements of the votes garnered by people at the lower cadre, including the MPs, was actually done at the polling stations. The pronouncements that were declaring the presidency were not done until we saw those votes reach the National Tallying Center. And you have said, well, that the issue, according to you, was comparison between the Form 34s and the Form 34As and the Bs. And even the order of the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court was saying the repeat election would be done within the Constitution. And then things started going hayway. Within that Constitution, I want to put it there before I come to whether my election is valid or not. Just saying that the problems were systematic. Bear with me, but let me use KTN as an example. Right now, if things went wrong and this program does not continue as expected, we will not just blame KTN. Of course, you can give apology on behalf, but the management will wonder, where was the technician? Who was behind all this? And this is what we are saying. Much as the judges did not pinpoint specific people and individuals in IBC, we cannot be blackmailed as Kenyans to believe that those problems just arose on their own.
So for you, someone has to bear the brunt?
Yes, somebody has to be answerable. Somebody has to explain to us what really took place.
All right.
Because according to the Constitution and what was agreed according to the electoral laws that were governing us during this time, the Form 34As were to be conveyed through scanning and then some electronic means, the way they were. And so, whatever the Form 34s we had on the ground, there shouldn't have been any difference with whatever figures would come at the National Tallying Station whatsoever.
All right, I want us to
and we
take a
didn't see that. So my election is valid. I wanted to re-emphasize that because my results were pronounced there and then, and there was no dispute about it. But now the presidential tallying caused the problem, and that is why there was a bone of contention.
All right, let's
so
take a
we
look
cannot
at,
resign.
Let's take a look
and
at
we are
the
not
reasons.
going to resign.
And I will let you
IBC.
react to that
Yes.
in a short while. Let's just take a look at what Raila Odinga, the NASA leader, said concerning this repeat poll of the October the 26th.
The sham election portends a president who is in office unconstitutionally. You have a constitution with ambiguous provisions on the standards that elections must fulfill. The same constitution states that power can only be exercised by democratically elected leaders. If sham election is allowed to stand, what will stop the regime from conducting sham referenda to remove the constitutional provisions that they do not like, for example, term limits? Nothing. It has two organs. The Coalition's Parliamentary Party, PP, and the National Resistance Movement. The resistance movement shall be responsible for implementing a vigorous, positive political action program that includes economic boycotts, peaceful processions, picketing, and other legitimate forms of protest.
Raila Odinga saying something that we've had not just from him, but NASA allied MPs as well, that this election is a complete sham, and we're at a risk of setting a precedence of things not working right in this country. But you still wanted to respond to her with regards why she would not resign if they think that IEBC is lacking.
You know, she's having double speak here because she said IEBC is culpable of the sham presidential election. And the same IEBC, because the same official who conducted the election at the lower level, they conducted the presidential election. And unfortunately, you do not expect a parliamentary election to be transmitted to the National Tallying Center. They are going to the constituency of the county. So the same thing transpired there. And based on that, you remember Chebukati went to court after the petition to seek clarification on what should transpire when in the event that the Form 34Bs and Form 34As differ. To me, at the point of election, there were two conflicting areas. First of all, the Maina-Kiai ruling said that the constituency tallying center and the result declared there is final, and it cannot be altered. Then the Supreme Court came and faulted Chebukati for not verifying against Form 34. So Chebukati was asking if the results have been declared and entered into Form 34B, and the court said it's final. It cannot be altered. What do you want me to do with Form 34? It was a logical thing. And the Supreme Court went to say, just note down and tell Kenyans there's a discrepancy, but go ahead and declare what's in the Form 34A. So, to me, it was not logical even in the Supreme Court ruling. They were twisting each other. So Chebukati was in a fix. Number two, to go to what Raila Odinga has said. You know, it's within his right to boycott election. But they did something very, very wrong, especially from the county of Mheshimiwa. You know, when you are boycotting stuff and when you don't want to participate, please allow those who want to participate to participate. You know, your right ends when you disrupt my right. You could have allowed the polling station to open without interference, restrain your supporters. Let IEBC open the polling station. Let those who want to vote, vote. Because there was intimidation there. People are being checked if you voted and being beaten. I've seen several. Mheshimiwa has talked about the Kandara MP, the scuffle with the returning officer. But he's not talking when Kisumu Senate was beating an IEBC official when they were doing a training in Kisumu. And people carrying knives, chasing IEBC official. It's, if you want people to respect your choice, respect the choice of others. Open the polling station. Let those who want to vote, vote. Remember, even 0 is a number. 0 can be returned as a number. But don't blockade the polling station, then call this a sham election. That's not right.
I think, if I'm not far from the truth, you are misleading the country. I don't understand that logics you are talking about. Whatsoever would be able to cause a difference between the Form 34As and the 34Bs. If the figures that are in Form 34A is accurately transferred into the other form, there would be no difference. So just telling us that it was a mere discrepancy and it would be considered a mere discrepancy and then go ahead and declare and then, you know, it doesn't make sense. What we are saying is, as NASA, and from a personal perspective and even the Christian perspective, what we are fighting for as NASA is doing it right. If you counted at the polling station A and you found Pamela has got 2 votes, transfer the same into the coalition sheet and let it go like that throughout. But a scenario where we were seeing forms where Pamela has 2 votes here, when it reaches here, it is 200 and something votes. It doesn't make sense. And that way, we are saying, even if election was repeated 10 times under the same regime with the same mentality, we will not get anywhere. Number 2, brother, there was no intimidation in Migori or anywhere. I come from Migori, and in fact, when you are touching that area, it feels so bad. Because we declared as NASA, we didn't want to participate in that election. In fact, we went live, even me, I came here, and we said, we are telling our people to stay away and stay indoors. But you know what happened? This rogue police that was sent to some of these areas, they would start beating people. Even when people, they just saw 2, 3 people gathered together. And yet Kenyans in this very constitution have got right of assembly. So
are you saying Kenyans in those areas were provoked?
They were provoked, and it was just sheer provocation. And it was some people like, I'm sitting here, and there is a boy called Collins, 10-year-old child, breathing in pain at Mombasa Hospital. His intestine was shattered. And you know where this child was found? At the veranda of the parents, playing there, quite very. So when we are talking about these issues, do not even bring in the concept of the police. I don't want us to veer off the main topic. The main topic we are challenging here is the presidency, the executive, not the MPs, not the county member of assemblies. We are talking about the movement or whatever took place between the polling station and the point where this tallying is done. And let us remove Kenyans from this concept of things are going wrong, and because we fear to face the challenge, we are saying let's cover it up and move on. No, we have to stop and correct it. By the way, the constitution in question, it is the Kenyans who made it.
So then how are we correcting it?
And this is what we are now saying. NASA says we are taking back and saying this constitution bestows every sovereignty, the power of the nation in the people of Kenya. And so when we are talking about the concept of a people's assembly, we are not talking about anything violent. We are talking about these people who gave the executive the power. If the executive has become so intimidating, what do we do about it? The people have to come up.
All right, let's take a look at what Raila Odinga said about the economic boycotts, and not specifically Raila Odinga, but of course members of parliament allied to NASA while they were launching the economic boycott, and of course mentioning some companies and why they think they should be boycotted. Let's take a look at that bite.
With immediate effect, we are launching the program of economic liberation through targeted boycott of companies, corporations, and businesses that are beneficiaries and supporters of this regime that is destroying Kenya and frustrating the dreams and aspirations of our people.
But we are giving our members until Friday next week to migrate from Safaricom. 2, Brookside Dairies. And this includes Brookside, Ilara, Molo Milk, and Delamere, and all products produced by Brookside Dairies. 3, Bidco Industries.
The results from the polling station, Kim's kit, left the country but never found its way back to IEBC. None of the kits under Safaricom's network ever got their results into the IEBC public web portal.
Well, I'll start with you, Mbugua.
Yes.
Do you think this is going to be effective, or it's just hot air?
First of all, I don't understand the criteria that NASA came up with to list those companies for the boycott. I think they should be transparent enough also to tell us the criteria. I don't know whether it's the tribe of the owners or the management or the clientele. I don't know which ones they choose to pick for them to go for the boycott. Number 2, I'll say that clients take a lot of time to relate to companies together, and it's very difficult to kill that bond in just a few minutes. And let me give you an example for Safaricom itself. It employs over 200,000 people indirectly. The M-Pesa shop, those who sell Zeltem, including members of NASA and their leaders. And it's unfortunate that the leaders are telling people to boycott those companies in the effect that those people will lose their livelihood, where Shimiwas will be picking a fat check and continue their lifestyle. They will go drink tea at Serena. They won't tell them to use a certain milk for the tea in Serena unless they take black tea, etc. So it's heartening me to the common man on the ground, because he's the one who will suffer brand. Those who make 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, those whose house will be the first one to be locked by the landlord in the effect of such things. So I like NASA to be sober enough also and to consider their supporters. Unless, when I'll trust them is when honorable members from NASA also boycott their salary. In fact, when Mheshimiwa said about People Assembly and the power belongs to the people directly, themselves, they're representative of the people. So if they want the people to exercise their sovereignty directly, even then they should resign and tell them, I'm not longer your representative. all of us are the representative of the people.
You raise a question that has been asked since that particular announcement to boycott certain products by so many people on social media and beyond. What happens to those who work in these specific companies and their livelihoods depend on these particular companies, and yet they are NASA supporters?
Thank you. If you read whatever my colleagues were reading there, I think the criteria, the question of criteria is very well explained in that document. It's not vague. Unless you don't understand it, it is a matter of like Safaricom. Look at the honor that was given to Safaricom, especially in this particular exercise of the election. Even into 2013, I think the issue of Safaricom featured again because it was the predominantly monopolizing network in the country. And by going electronics, I don't know how the deal came about, but the figures or whatever was collected on the ground was to be transmitted through their server. And so when we are talking about Safaricom, it is a painful thing when a company is given that kind of honor and then goes ahead and does a wrong thing that they cannot justify, and then it just goes scot-free. I think that may explain. And then the issue of the other companies, it is explained in that document that most of these companies we are talking about have got direct or indirect links with Jubilee in one way or another. And that's why we are saying boycott their products. Why? Because much as we are thinking by letting things go on as they have been going on is helpful to the wananchi, it is not. Because these people keep amassing the wealth at the expense of those very wananchi. So this time round, in fact, the reports that we have say that like the migration to other service providers is very effective and quite a number of people. And we also want these bulldozers to feel the pinch.
So what happens to those who work at this
Those
company?
who work there, who says they cannot work with these other networks? You see, the issue here is consider where we have come from. Once upon a time, we had some very prominent companies which had also employed people. Like if you look at the transport industry, I think I started coming to Nairobi when there was this OTC thing. It's no longer there.
So then there's a question of how swift did you get a job after you quit yours?
In fact, some of these people are using their own money to become agents of, like the M-Pesa is talking about. They can use that same money and hook up with the other service providers. Like Airtel, already have Airtel money, it has been working. So, brother, what we are saying here is, we don't have to play safe and use the wananchi who are actually suffering. Like the case of the economy, let me put it straight and clear. Our economy has been suffering and it has been on its knees since right from 2013 when we saw Jubilee government take over. They promised us a double-digit economy. We never saw it anywhere throughout the period of the 5 years. We saw supermarkets, like a big supermarket, the one I was even using as a case study in my classes. The Nakumat used to say, you need it, we've got it, yeah? We saw it taking away. There was no election. We have seen the oil prices escalating in Kenya every other day. We have seen these youths come out of the university. There's no job for them. There is no hope. So somebody is scapegoating on the NASA and the election as the only reason why economy is going to suffer.
All right, quickly, I don't think we
can't take that lying down.
You know, it's a farce what Mheshimiwa is saying, because you cannot imply a management issue on the economy. Let's take example of Tuskys and Nakumat. Tuskys is flourishing, Nakumat is going down. That's not about the economy, that's management. We've seen in the case of some cement companies, some are going up, some are going down. We've seen Carrefour coming forward. We've seen a number of domestic tourism in Mombasa going upward because of SGR. We've seen electricity almost every homestead. So there's a lot of progress that has gone on with Jubilee, and with a lot of sabotaging from...
so for you, the economy is doing fine. The Kenyan economy is doing fine.
Go down.
No, I'm saying for Safaricom, let me tell Mheshimiwa something. You know, in this world, innovation carries the day. It doesn't care whether... Airtel has been there before. They've been there, they've done that before. You know, Safaricom has thrived because of its innovation. Yeah, something like M-Pesa was the first one in the world, Lipa na M-Pesa. So it's innovation that's keeping it in the market. Not I'm sure even most of NASA guys, they're still in Safari, they're not leaving anytime soon.
No, we have.
So I have so many friends in NASA, and up to today I was telling them, can I send you the M-Pesa of boycott? I said, well, send me the money. So innovation will keep Safaricom afloat, not what politician thinks. And this thing NASA is saying is hot air. Give it to them. They had Okwa Kenya. They had so many initiatives, but they're down now. Even this one will come to pass.
I want us to take a short break. Pamela, I know you
I don't think so. Before the short break, Okoa Kenya actually Okoa'd Kenya, because what Okoa Kenya was all about, there have been sections of this country where even the youth struggle to get their IDs. And when NASA took this initiative, we saw quite a number of them registered, and we followed and we got their IDs.
All right.
So this thing is not hot air.
It's not hot air. All right.
It can't be.
Let's take a quick break here on CrossFire. Brand Bugwa, political analyst, Pamela Adhiambo, women representative, the county of Migori. We will be back with more here. Don't go too far.